Blog Talk Radio.
Hey everyone, and welcome to C Radio. We are back on the air for two shows in a matter of what is it? 3 weeks? This is unheard of in a very long time. I don't know the last time we did anything like this. I mean, it must have been months ago that we had anything like this going on, maybe even years ago. But we're happy to be back.
We're back.
Yes.
And we're back with the same people that were here with you 3 weeks ago. So if you didn't get enough of us then, we're back with you tonight. Who are those people? I am Mark DeNicola of the CET. Sitting directly across from me in a lovely shirt is...
You're speaking with Jeff tonight, guys. How's it going?
And directly across from Jeff, sitting right next to me on my right is...
Vanessa Petronelli, write for CE, and I own my own company, Open Heart, Open Mind, Health and Wellness.
Yay. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, guys. I'm so honored to be back and to be doing the second show with you. This is really exciting.
It is. It's fun. Hopefully we get a good momentum going here and make it a regular thing.
Would love that.
We got lots to talk about.
Yeah.
And we have a very relevant and interesting general topic tonight to talk about that I'm sure we're going to delve anywhere. And before we even get to that, I want to let everybody know that's listening now, whether you're listening to this live or on the archives, we're going to be giving you opportunities to get involved in these shows, both in this one and other ones moving forward. They're designed to be interactive. So there's opportunities for everyone to get questions answered live on air, whether they want to call in, whether they want to write in through the chat. Even if you don't want to talk to us directly, but you want to talk to one another as listeners, we have a live chat going. In the past, we've had people getting so much value out of these shows, not only from us, but also from communicating with each other, getting really cool topics going and sharing their own personal information to continue conversations afterwards. And that's what this is really all about. So we're really happy to be here tonight. We're happy to be on the air. Our show is about a really cool subject that I think it's impossible that anyone in this world has not been faced with at least one of these, probably both of these, in several forms. That's how sure I am about it. But the things we're going to focus on is the idea of comparison.
Yeah.
Yes. And the idea of the whole need for approval, which could be directly linked to comparison, but also could be a thing on its own. But the things that come up a lot. I think probably a good space to start is, let's focus on the comparison first. Let's maybe either one of you have maybe a personal experience you want to talk about either in your past or something presently now that seems to creep up regularly or creeped up really intensely in the past of a way that you compared yourself, whether it be internally or instigated by other people leading you to compare yourself to certain things. Do either of you guys have like a story or anything or an anecdote?
How long do we have?
We have 90 minutes.
Well, I'd like to hear from you guys. Wow. I mean, this is something I wrote about actually recently for Collective Evolution, was about comparison and seeking approval from others and how to stop that, because I know the dangerous impact it sort of has had on my own personal experience. And I mean, there's been so many instances and experiences that I've had, situations, relationships, where I have found myself comparing myself to others. But I would say the most general story that I can share with all of you is just the idea that I never felt guided to lead a life that was very much in the box or that was similar to what everybody else was doing around me. And we talked a little bit about that in the first show when I shared my life story, my personal story of how I ended up here. So just the whole idea of not doing the conventional way. Yeah, you got it. Way of living my life. I did go to school. I did do all those things. I went, did a post-grad. I did my post-secondary. I did stick to that quote-unquote stuff. But it was always about me following my heart. And I always dared to be a little bit different and uniquely me. But the problem with that is that life doesn't fully support us. There's this, I call this the template of society. The template of society is very much conditioned from the time we were a child on how life should sort of unfold. And if we don't follow that template, which is not a one-size-fits-all, and we'll talk a little bit about that, I'm sure, as the evening progresses, you start to feel almost like you're left out or you don't belong or things aren't happening quite as fast or as quickly as other people. For example, when I had, friends who were buying houses and getting married and, now having babies and all of that, and I'm not really in that phase and wasn't in that phase, 5-6 years ago. They already had these careers where they were making decent salaries. And here I was going back to school and opening up another business, a small business, and, you know, following my dreams of being in the entertainment industry years ago. I mean, it was daunting at times because that ego part of your mind says,
it's comparing.
Yeah, it's comparing, and it's saying, well, if only you took the path that everyone else followed, maybe you wouldn't be in this position where you're feeling like you're walking uphill. It feels sometimes like that path of, you know, more resistance, not least resistance. But that's one of the things that I've done. I've noticed that over the years I've compared myself. I compared myself to other actors, models when I was in that industry. I compared myself to friends, to people who are making more money. Even from time to time, even now, you know, I can see myself comparing myself to other coaches or people who are in a similar line of work. I would be lying if I said to you that I haven't danced or played around with that idea even in the last 5 years of doing this work. It's a part of us that sort of just creeps up from time to time. But the difference between somebody who maybe is lacking that self-awareness and to somebody who's self-aware and you know, moving towards that more personal spiritual development is that you can keep that in check.
Absolutely. You recognize it right away. It happens because we're human, but you recognize it and can say, okay, this doesn't feel good. What am I doing? Let's step out of that.
Absolutely. And, I mean, we're going to get more into this, but when you start to compare yourself to others, you are now denying yourself of who you really are and sharing that with the world. Because we're not here to be clones of each other or replicas of other people. We're here to be ourselves. Why would we be created in the way that we are, in the likeness that we are, if we're meant to be like everyone else? If you think about it, it just doesn't make any sense. And I have no idea why we have bought into that and we continue to buy into that.
Right. Absolutely.
Pick up a magazine. What do you generally do? You compare yourself.
That's the worst. Yeah. I feel like complete shit when I look through one of those magazines. It's like beautiful person after beautiful person, and it's just like you just look at yourself and you compare, and you can't help it. But it happens, and you feel like shit.
Yeah. So that's my story on my end. I mean, it's a little bit more of a general tidbit or share for everyone, but we'll get more maybe into specifics as we continue this conversation. I'm so happy to divulge and open up about that.
I think the interesting thing, like when it comes to this comparison, is that it's become so much of the norm that everyone's doing it that most of the things that we're concerned about, people aren't even fabricating the thoughts of us because they're too busy worrying about how other people are looking at them. So we're all so preoccupied with comparing ourselves to others that nobody's actually doing anything of what we're actually fearing. So everything's kind of just coming from our minds. It's like, I'm not sitting here comparing myself to Jeff. It's like, but Jeff maybe thinks I am. You know, it's just an easy example that way, right? And I could think that Jeff's comparing himself to me or anything, but we're not actually doing these things because we're too self-preoccupied. I think that we need to shift away from that anyway, right? The whole preoccupation and this whole coming together and realizing that we embrace our uniqueness. You know? It's like we embrace that. We find, because we're all lovable. We're all beautiful people. We all have so much to share, so much to give in this world. It doesn't matter what package we came in or what part of the world we're in. So we need to shift towards that. But even in the meantime, if it's a nice, helpful tip, it's realizing that everyone's too busy in their own minds to even pass much judgment that your mind's concocting that they have of you. It doesn't even exist.
Oh, yeah, it's so true. And that's so much, I mean, we just have to watch how we project onto other people and the experiences we're having. I mean, and take ownership for our own stuff, our own thoughts, our own feelings, our own stories. You know, and that helps to start keeping you in check and coming back to, okay, you know, why am I feeling the need to compare myself?
It's because there's these standards for beauty that we've set as a world. It's not even just within certain cultures. It's a whole world. I mean, you have these dark-skinned people who are bleaching their skin. You have these Asians that are getting eyelid surgery. You have this one standard of beauty that's just being bombarded in our faces. But
here's the thing. We've allowed that. The people, the masses have bought into that because we have a belief system that is anchored into us and conditioned into us that we aren't good enough being our own unique self. And that's the core to all of this. You know, we have the ability to say, no, that's not the standard of beauty that I'm going to agree upon, but we buy those magazines and we enable that system to perpetuate.
Right.
If we stood our ground and we said, you know what, it's time to get to the core of why we're buying into this. then we may have the ability to put an end to that. That's just my 2 cents around it, because I feel like we have allowed ourselves to buy into that. Yes, the system is saying, here, this is the ideal standard of beauty. You need to look this way because it supports that belief system of not feeling good enough, so we can support the economy and consumerism.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have the ability, because as human beings, you have to remember, we have the ability to make choice. That's what free will is. You and I get to choose what we're going to buy into, what we're going to adopt, what we're going to take on, and what we're not. And that's what allows us to step more into our power.
Right, and it's the kind of touches on the second part of our show, which is the approval of others. And I think that's what a lot of people are looking for to begin with, and that's why we compare ourselves, because we want to be approved by the group which is society.
It's that tribal feeling that each of us have, it's that sense of belonging. But the thing is, I think society is craving so much of that right now, because we're moving into the shift of unity, creating a unity consciousness. And I think we've been wanting that for hundreds and hundreds of years, but we've kind of gone around or beaten around the bush in how to achieve that by creating this belief that we need to be like everyone else in order to belong or to be a part of a community, versus now being in community and being uniquely you and knowing that you are enough, just being who you are. As you can see, I'm pretty passionate.
It's a powerful lesson, absolutely.
I put a lot of thought into this.
I'm sitting across from Oprah over here or something.
Oh, boy.
I'm falling for it.
I would love to meet her one day, so.
Oh, me too. She seems like a cool chick.
Yes, she does.
I know if it's legit or not.
And now she's on Starbucks cups. I mean, she's got to be legit.
Woo!
Right?
Yeah, we're back there. There's a Starbucks cup.
What does it say?
Oprah chai, isn't it?
It says, know what sparks the light in you, then use that light to illuminate the world.
Know what sparks the light in you, and use that light to illuminate the world.
That's pretty powerful
Just in case
marketing.
You couldn't hear that was Amanda, the live studio audience in the background.
I like that, though. It's like you get your coffee and you get a positive message with it, and usually the whole practice of drinking coffee or tea is kind of sacred, and people look forward to that, so it's kind of nice having that message.
Well, and it's using that marketing to actually do good in the world versus that marketing when we open up a magazine, let's say, and I know magazines are kind of like on the hot seat right now. Not all magazines are like this, but a lot of beauty magazines for men and women are like this, where they're using marketing to kind of exploit human beings in some ways, or to objectify them in some ways, and to make us not feel good enough, versus this is more empowering.
Totally.
And uplifting.
Yeah, I agree.
What's that? Now, before we actually go to the other part of comparison I want to talk about, just because I think it's no coincidence that we kind of have this here tonight. I mean, you yourself are very familiar with the entertainment industry. You've been engaged in that. You mentioned it a couple minutes ago. You've gone through the experience of being an actress, being a model. I've also been engaged in it myself, not so much the modeling side, but hey, no problem. But the acting side. But what advice, and this could go to either one of you, what advice would you give to somebody who's fully ingrained in an industry that whether they're doing it internally or not, they're going to a room to be seen one after another to be basically compared to other people.
And rejected.
Exactly.
Told they're not good enough, yeah.
That's a really, really powerful question. Do you want me to take this one on, or would you like, well, we'll contribute to this together, because I'd love to hear your thoughts around this too, Jeff. I was that person in those rooms, and, going from casting to casting, from audition to audition, and going into that business, that industry, I noticed the decline of my self-worth, my self-value, my self-confidence diminish. Now, on more of that spiritual aspect or personal development aspect, it was the experience that I needed to have in order to get where I am today, in order to know that I am good enough, that I don't need to conform and be like all these other people.
So what's it like? So did they just tell you flat out no? Like, listen, you're not it. I will share a personal story. I remember I had booked a modeling job,
and it was for a lookbook for a designer, pretty well-known designer for that particular season. I can't remember the year now. And basically, you were the muse for the season, and you're modeling the entire collection for possible buyers and customers or clients to purchase those clothes. And I was working with a well-known makeup artist, and I remember him saying to me, "I have no idea how you're booking jobs right now, sweetheart. Your skin is full of acne," because I did break out. It served because it really tested my self-image and my feeling of not being good enough. And I remember sitting back and he's like, "You're so lucky. I don't even know how you're working right now, let alone even going to castings. Like, if I was your agent, I wouldn't be sending you out on everything and make sure that your skin got cleared." And I was floored.
Wow.
But that is an example of what that industry is like. And a lot of people would argue and say, well, if you don't want to be compared to other people, if you don't want to be judged on how you look or your quote-unquote talent, then don't sign up for that industry. Looking back, I can see I bought right into it. I compared myself a lot. Am I as skinny as the other girls? Am I as attractive as the other girls that are here? And I was a little bit older. I would say I experienced that more in modeling than I did in acting, for example, or in the music industry. But they all kind of went hand in hand. But I remember just feeling so deflated. I mean, I was always on an emotional roller coaster ride, and I was always feeling, down on myself. I developed very poor body image disorder, if you will.
Right.
I think it's called body dysmorphic disorder, where you feel like you are bigger than you actually are. I was going to the gym 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, and it still was never enough, and then my skin broke out. I mean, my soul has just sort of led me to all of these very interesting experiences to really push me into knowing who I am and to rising above these human-based problems and issues we face. But, I would honestly tell somebody who's going into that industry to really get clear on why it is that you're going there. I mean, if you are looking to stand out and be uniquely you, and you want to shine in all of your glory with your talent, with your uniqueness, whether that be in modeling, acting, singing, dancing, whatever it is, you also have to be very prepared that where this industry is still at, and I think it has opened up a little bit more. We are starting to change a little bit, and the industry is starting to change. You have got to be prepared for that comparison or seeking approval, because your paychecks are dependent on being that face or that person of the season or of that period of time, and it's hard to say, have tough skin, because I thought I had tough skin, but looking back and all of the work that I've done on myself, I was pretty much ripped to shreds by the time I got out of that industry.
I mean, creative people are just sensitive people in general.
Yeah.
Artists are sensitive people. They look for the approval and the recognition for their art, and in return they're very sensitive, so they can get really hurt. And it's a very kind of like a vicious cycle for artists.
A lot of highs and lows.
Yeah, Mark knows all about it.
Yeah, lots of highs and lows. And it's the same thing even with acting, too. I don't know, you can speak to this too, Mark. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. It's just, when you prepared this piece or you put your own personality into it, because I feel in acting you're able to develop that character and make it your own.
Yeah.
And when you go into a room and you basically might get cut off halfway through your sides, or your sides are another word for script, or lines, or you're told that that's not the way they would like it or want it, or you're just flat out, you have a no or a next or thank you. It's pretty dejecting, and you are actually allowing more of your vulnerability and your personality to shine through in that character. So it's a difficult industry. I say if you really want to nail through working through not feeling good enough and perfectionism and developing a higher sense of self-confidence and being able to stand in your power of who you are, get into that industry if you've got the fear around it. It will smack you across the face very quickly.
No, thank you.
It puts you through the ringer, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
It will force you to look at that, even if there's something that's been very apparent in your life the whole way, or just a little thing that's just waiting to come up. That industry will thrust it upon you and make sure that you're looking at that. And like I myself right now, just like a couple weeks ago, I've actually decided to step away from it. I'm taking a break from it completely, and it's just something that is coming from other factors as well, of other things I want to focus on. But even myself, if I was actually honest with myself, I realized that a lot of the highs and the lows that we were talking about was because so much of what wanted to be an actor, yes, I loved playing with the craft, and yes, when I got the opportunity, I gave all of myself to it, but it was driven by this fame and attention-hungry ego that didn't love itself enough, that the only way it could ever feel that it was worthy of self-love if it was getting it from others. So you ask that ego, what's the best way to feel self-love all the time? Well, give me a screaming group of 20,000 girls that love me. Why not? Let's go for that. Let's get the big movie. Let's go to the big premiere. I mean, if I could think, I mean, I've had a great time playing some fantastic characters, but if I were to say some of the most memorable moments of my life is when I've been on a stage and everyone's acknowledging the performance after it's done. So where's that coming from? It's not the performance itself, it's the attention that comes as a result of it. It's what gets more gratification.
Right.
But even when you get it, the ego's never satisfied.
Well, that's what we went to, that event, that MK Ultra event, where Roseanne Barr talked about the entertainment industry, and someone asked her, if your kids asked you about going to the entertainment industry, what would you say? And she was like, if my kids wanted to be actors, I would tell them to go out on the front lawn and act out a play in front of the neighborhood, because if it's about the actual acting, it doesn't matter where you do it. And I thought that was really funny, because it was so true. And she's coming from a place of experience with the dark side of the industry.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting, and I think that's true. If you love acting, there's many mediums. Same with dancing, singing, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't have to be the big Hollywood Walk of Fame kind of career. You know what I mean? And
if that ends up coming about, then that's what's meant to be. It'll be dandy to play with that, but it's not that that's do or die. That's the only way you feel content or anything like that. I think that's actually a great segue. Before I do this segue, I've been asked to give a shout out to a long-time listener, fan, even member of Collective Evolution who happens to be listening right now. He's been texting me like crazy because he just loves hearing our voices. But a gentleman by the name of Mr. Stephen Irving. Steve actually served as the director of photography on Collective Evolution's first ever short film, A Fear of Living. I'm going to use Steve as a segue to this next part, because every time I have a conversation with Steve on the phone, we always have one particular thing. I mean, now he works hard. He's got so many things that are happening for him in his life that I'm so happy for him. I love the fact that he's found a girl and he's so happy with her, and you know, he's working to build a future that he's looking forward to and stuff like that. But whenever we talk, we always talk about the one same core issue, and that's that he's either looking at the past when we used to do the films, and he's wishing that he could still do that now, you know, that version of himself where he was free and capable to do that, or he's looking to the future, just waiting for the day when he's going to have the ability to do that again. So how I'm using Steve here is forget comparison to others, forget the magazines, forget the audition rooms, forget anything like that. Let's talk about the comparisons that we do internally to either a previous version of ourselves that we thought was great, maybe not in the moment of it, but now when we look back at it, we're like, hey, I compare myself to that, I'm discontent now. Or some future version of ourselves, you know, I mean, I just saw the movie, what was it called last night?
Neighbors.
Neighbors, thank you. And, you know, I looked at Zac Efron, hey, good-looking guy, he's got a great body. You look at that and you're like, hey, that'd be pretty handy to have that body. I can look at that future version of myself, I'll go work hard. I'd like that version of me a little bit better, you know, so let's talk a little bit about this comparison that we have internally to either a previous version of ourselves or some hopeful future version of ourselves, and what that can do.
That's an awesome question. You know, when we're comparing ourselves to our past, we're not being accepting of where we are today in this moment. And the problem with that is that we're basically saying to the spirit, which is consciousness within us, the universe moving through us, that where I'm at now isn't correct. And it's based on the ego's judgment of where it thinks you should be. You have to remember the ego is that lower level of consciousness that resides within us. It is the part of us that is still very much hooked onto separation and survival and fear and that comparison and looking outside of oneself to feel whole and complete. It's like comparing an apple and an orange, really, in this scenario. You know, when you look back at your past, it's wonderful to appreciate and be grateful for the experiences you've had, the opportunities that presented themselves. But we also need to be cognizant of experiencing that in the present, because what we're really doing when we appreciate and give gratitude to the present, we're saying the source, the consciousness that resides within me knows exactly what it's doing beyond what my ego is saying, the stories of my ego, the judgment of my ego. And everything that's playing out in my life right now is absolute, in perfect order, in perfect timing, and is exactly where it needs to be. So it's even if you don't like where you're at right now, and we've all gone through that, where we're in the present moment and we're feeling uncomfortable, things might not be working out the way we want them to, or we had sort of foreseen or anticipated. It's always helpful to come back to who you really are. And that's why this inner work is so important, because if you are living out of your mind, if you're living out of the hemisphere of the ego and the conscious and the subconscious mind and all of the conditionings and all of the patterns and all of the stories and all of the stuff that's happened from your past and what could possibly happen in the future, you've forgotten who you are. And that's the part of you that keeps you locked in this, back 10 years ago when I was 120 pounds and I was beautiful and, I had the most amazing life and everything was so hunky-dory and, everything was working perfectly, to today where it's not that. Well, you are not looking at that opportunity for you to change who you are and get to know who you are in the present. That's your only job, is to be present to who you are today. And it's from there that you're able to make those necessary changes moving forward. I mean, the one thing that I will say about that hopeful future version of oneself, because I do a lot of this in coaching, you have to remember, I'm interested in knowing where a client really would love to see their life go, that magnificence, that dream. Obviously, in the first phase of the work we're doing together, they're connecting, they're understanding who they are on a mind, body, spirit level, and they're embodying that. Mm-hmm. So once they're in alignment and they're connecting to that essence, that source that resides within them, and their ego is healthy and not, taking over, then they're able to create that future that is in alignment with their purpose, is in alignment with their gifts and their skills and why they're really here. So in that present moment, when we look at where we're currently at, rather than focusing on the future or reminiscing about the past, we're able to make whatever necessary changes we need to make, be that just merely sometimes accepting where we're at, giving gratitude and appreciating where we're at, but we're also honoring the essence of our being by saying, where I'm at is perfect. This is where I need to be. I always say to clients, you're neither a second ahead or a second behind right now with your life. Every event that has unfolded and every event that will unfold is part of an intricate puzzle that we call life. Nothing is out of place. If you don't like it, it comes back to that choice. You get to work on changing that, but only through acceptance and only through knowing who you really are, not who you think you should be or what other people think you should be. Make sense?
Absolutely. I think you explained that really well.
Even Steve chimed in on the phone. He said she's hitting it on the nail. So.
Thank you, Steve. Jeff, do you have anything that you want to share around that? Or?
Yeah, I mean, with the past, I think that we can all kind of get stuck in nostalgia and get stuck in the past and not accepting the current situation, just kind of like you said. For me, more so what my challenges are comparing myself to a future self in a sense, because, especially with my fitness levels, I have these goals that I want to attain, and in a sense, I'm not accepting my body at this moment. I have these goals and I want to get there, and until I get there, I'm not good enough. So it's kind of like a vicious cycle, and that's what I'm facing right now. And it's a strange battle. Your mind's really, really tricky. You really have to do your best, like you said, to just stay present and stay grounded, and to remind yourself that you are perfect right now. Mm-hmm. You're gonna get there, and having that state of mind also sabotages you anyways. In the end, it's just gonna make the journey miserable, right? So yeah, that's where mine comes from. Mainly future comparison as opposed to the past.
But our future self that we are desiring to create, it's a journey to get there. We're always so anticipatory and excited about those outcomes of what will look like in the future, what will be like in the future, that we've taken away the enjoyment of the process of getting there. You can have these wonderful goals and dreams and visions for yourself, but always keeping yourself in check in that moment and saying, this is exactly where I need to be right now. I get that I have a future self that I'm creating, but I'm going to enjoy the process of getting there, the opportunities to learn and to play with what's happening in this moment.
Totally.
Mm-hmm. And you touched upon a really great point, because it brought me back to something that I experienced back in the day too, when I was slowly moving out of the modeling and entertainment industry, and I had discovered yoga. I had put on weight. I mean, the weight literally was like coming out of nowhere, and it was part of the universal plan of my life to nudge me forward into my future self, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I remember working out as much as I would, in previous months and years, and the weight not budging. I went to hot yoga because I discovered hot yoga, and I thought, when I first started hot yoga, my intention was, I get to maybe lose some weight because I'm going to sweat all the toxins and lose some pounds in this. For 6 months, not an inch came off my body. If anything, I was ballooning a little bit more. And something just clicked. I still remember this moment like it was yesterday, actually. There I am putting a pair of jeans on because I couldn't fit into any of my jeans. I literally, any jeans that I had worn for those years just couldn't even go over my knees, guys. I don't know what had happened, okay?
Whoa.
And I was trying on some jeans that were of a bigger size, and something just clicked. I came to this moment of acceptance that where and who I was perfect. And I said to myself, if I'm meant to be this weight, if I'm meant to wear this jean size for the rest of my life, rather than fighting it and holding myself wrong and playing small and not feeling good about myself and hating my body, because it was really like self-hatred that I had developed, maybe I should just accept that this is who I am and just love myself and try that on for a size. And I swear it was like an internal shift, like a light switch went off, a light bulb went off for me in that moment, and slowly the weight started to come off from there. My intentions around yoga started to change. It took time. Please don't think it was something that happened overnight. Yeah. But I started to lose that excess weight the more that I was working on myself, the more that I was accepting myself, the more that I was getting to the root and the crux to where this stuff was coming from.
Right.
It was through my yoga journey that initially started it that helped me to heal that. But I certainly wasn't losing the weight when I was staring in the mirror and saying, God, Vanessa, you've gained a lot of weight and you're fat and, you don't look good and you're not as attractive as you once were. And how can you even step out into public wearing, bigger jeans? I mean, it was awful self-talk,
right.
Really, really negative self-talk. And as soon as
you came to a point of surrender and you let go of resistance.
Yes.
And that's when everything changed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's powerful, that surrender and that, letting go of the resistance and just accepting. Because it was through acceptance that I was able to make some powerful choices and decisions about my lifestyle and why I was living my life that way. And it wasn't, in alignment with who I was. Going to the gym for 2 hours a day, 7 days a week was outrageous.
Yep.
And not sustainable for me.
That weight is a physical manifestation of something else.
Absolutely.
I wholeheartedly believe in that. I've seen it with a couple of my friends.
100%.
In a dark place in your life, you have this extra weight on and you come out of that space mentally and it's like the weight just disappears effortlessly. It
does. And it's all about, what are you holding on to emotionally, mentally, about yourself, about your life, about your past. And it's literally a protective barrier around you, right, when you're holding on to that. It's protecting you against the world. And the minute that you are stepping more into who you are and you're accepting and loving yourself, that weight just drops off because you don't need to hold on to it. You really don't. But I know that we've strayed a little bit from.
Good. I just want to say,
it's a fun discussion.
That's ultimately the power of consciousness. And a lot of people don't like to give that credit, but I think it was something we shared a long time ago on Collective Evolution, several years ago, about this little kid who was sick, and I think he was dying with some disease. I don't want to misstate it, so I don't know what, but he was dying with something, and his parents were in a situation where they couldn't afford to give him the health care to take care of it through any traditional way, but we don't need to get into that, whether or not that's effective. But, they basically just gave the kid candies, and they told him that they were the magic pills that were going to make him better. And this kid healed himself, and he got better. Why? Because the power of consciousness. Yep. He fully believed in what he was taking. It didn't matter what it was. He fully supported it. And I think, I can't say this as a scientific fact, but in my opinion, consciousness can play at times up to 95% of the reality that you're experiencing.
100%.
I agree with you.
Manipulating energy.
Yeah. And it is when people ask me what is it going to take for our world to change and for me to change, I say your consciousness, the consciousness of the planet. I know it's sounds like a very simplistic way of answering it, but
or cliche.
I have seen this over and over again play out in all of my clients and in many of the students that I've taught in yoga over the years and in my workshops, that they have completely transformed their lives, whatever that is, on a mind, body, spirit level, emotional level, energetic level, through the power of changing and shifting their consciousness to one of a higher energy frequency or vibration and of a higher level of consciousness. Mm-hmm. Because that resides within you. We've just completely forgotten that that's there. We've been told that doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. And we've bought into this all these belief systems in our minds and in what society has told us we are and who we should be. And that's why we fall into these traps of approval and comparison all the time. Because you're not actually connecting to who you are. Because if you were really connecting to who you are, and you were standing so powerfully in that, and I'm not just talking physically standing powerfully, I'm talking energetically, mentally, emotionally, like you're really taking a stand for that and connecting to yourself, you would not have these problems of comparing and needing approval, because you are consciousness in motion. You are the universe in motion. There's nothing more magnificent than that. Mm-hmm. You have a unique blueprint that nobody else, no other soul on this planet has except for you. There could be people who might be similar to you, may look kind of like you, may have a similar personality or name like you, but nobody is you on the planet. So why are you trying to squeeze yourself into a box that your mind is creating? Mm-hmm. It's ridiculous. If you actually look at it that way, it's
exhausting is what it is.
Yeah. And it's just unacceptable. I mean, you're really not enjoying and fulfilling the true contract of being a human being, I feel.
Absolutely.
Well, it's like, even if you're, let's use the working out example. If you're going to the gym for the intention of, I need to shed this weight, or I need to put on that muscle for X, Y, and Z. Basically, you're promoting a state of consciousness within yourself that says, I don't like this version of me. So as long as this version of me stays in place and not this version I'm going for, it's going to bring up a lot of things within me to look at. What do you think your soul's going to have more interest in? Gratifying your mind and saying, hey, yeah, let's get ripped real fast. Let's do all this, or let's shed that weight real fast and go beyond this. Or let's stay fat, or let's stay, unmuscular by your own mental definition. Mm-hmm. Because when you're there, you're obviously not at peace, and it brings up self-consciousness. It brings up, all the anger, fear. Mm-hmm. Who knows what the hell it brings up? But if it's doing all that, which one do you think it's going to stick with, right?
Yeah, your soul likes to take usually the most challenging path.
Exactly.
From personal experience.
Oh, and mine too. I second that one, Jeff. It doesn't always have to be that way, though, and that's the thing. I think the more that we're able to say, you know what, I'm ready to step into my fears, I'm ready to step into understanding where my belief systems are coming from, you're not in a state of resistance anymore, so it doesn't need to show up so intensely on your path. Mm-hmm. We do learn through intense experiences and situations, but we don't always need to learn that way. And when you're ready to step into that, whatever needs to show up will show up in your reality, but it's merely there out of an act of love. And I know that this is, and I've written about this before, this is a tough one for a lot of people to wrap their minds around, especially when we're not, looking at it from that higher perspective. How can all of these intense or bad experiences that I'm personally going through or that people are going through, how is that an act of love? Well, it's an act of love because it's helping you to grow into your fullest capacity. It's helping you to transcend your current level of consciousness. It's helping you to transcend above what you think and who you think you are and who you actually are. And it's doing those same things for the people around you. But again, we are making that choice, whether it's conscious or not, to allow those experiences to help us to move into our fuller capacity or to hinder us and to continue to play in that smaller version of who we are on a more ego-based level.
Mm-hmm. You said it.
So.
let's shift gears here for a sec, because I want to make sure that we leave a decent chunk of time at the end to talk about one particular aspect of this. It's shifting gears, but not really shifting gears, because it's definitely along the same lines. But let's touch upon more about this whole need for approval that we seem to have. So, we're comparing ourselves to others. We already touched on that in a number of ways. But how about this whole idea of how we feel when we're either getting approval or when we're not getting approval? Let's start with the real close to home stuff. Let's start with the family. I know that we've all made decisions that have pushed our family's buttons. We all have. I know that for a fact. I know some of our stories, and I don't even know everybody's story here, but I know enough of our stories to know that we've done things that have kind of pushed the envelope, right? That have really challenged things. So, if either one of you want to touch upon, maybe even just start with the experience of it, something that you might have done that, whether it be your entire family or just a particular family member or a very close friend or anything like that, didn't necessarily approve of. Let's maybe talk about that process of doing that, some of the challenges that may have arisen if you want to go down that route, or just what it took within you to actually go about doing something that you knew you had to do, even though it didn't necessarily come with the approval, because we know how easy it is to do things when the approval's there. So, either one of you, I don't know.
I do have a story, but
Yeah.
Jeff, if you'd like to start.
Sure, I can start. Yeah, approval of family, that's a really big one. I think what a lot of kids face, what a lot of kids go through, is wanting their parents' approval, so therefore they rush into school straight after high school, post-secondary school. They rush into a career that will look good in their parents' eyes, such as like a doctor or a lawyer or business. And I was one of those kids. I, wanted the approval of my parents. I thought that was the best way for me to do it. And I went to school and I rushed into this science degree. And ever since I was a little kid, I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be an artist. And, it didn't take too long for my soul to really start nudging me a couple years in, out of my 4-year degree, to be like, listen, you need some big changes. This is not right for you. And some pretty big things happened. I lost my brother, and I just was like, I had a huge epiphany about life, and I left school. But yeah, that was my original intent in going to school, was really just having that degree and looking good in my parents' eyes, especially my dad's eyes. I wanted them to, think of me as a really strong, successful person, and I equated that to having a degree. And I don't think that they pressured me in any sense. I just think that parents, they really care about their kids, and they just want them to be at peace and okay and not have to worry about them. So they think that just from their own conditioning, that going to school is going to get that for their child. It's going to make them happy. It's going to get them money. They're going to be okay. They don't have to worry about them. And that's ultimately where I think parents are always coming from. So it's never a bad place. But yeah, I think that's a really common thing. We want the approval of our parents. It's I think ingrained in our animal side almost.
Do you know why?
Do tell.
It really comes down for the need to feel loved. We seek that approval from our family and from those people who are closest to us because we want to feel loved for the choices and the person we are. That's really what it comes down to. Is if people approve of who I am and what I'm doing, the choices I'm making, then I get loved for that. I get praised for it. I get that approval. And it's so important and vital, for children especially, to receive that approval from mom and dad, because that is how they equate love. Take, for example, I'll use an example from my own personal life. I remember, when I was a kid, I was always that overachiever. I always wanted to get A's, A pluses, win first prize. I was the epitome of a perfectionist, really. And I didn't see it at the time that was a way of hindering me on my path. And really what it was anchored in was, seeking love and approval from others, especially my family. But when I wasn't perfect, when I wasn't getting, A's or B's, and I'd come home and I'd say, I got a C on this, or I didn't do well in math. I was never very good at math. That was not a fun subject for me. I could excel at all the other subjects, but math was just, I had a major mental block around it growing up. And I remember coming home and not doing well. And I would be rewarded and approved of and ultimately rewarded with love, whether that was with praise or reward, we're going to take you out for dinner, or, you're going to get a gift out of this because you got that A or that A+. And I remember when I'd come home with the math mark that was, maybe a C or a D or God, fail, I would get in trouble for it. Or I would get that look of disapproval or not feeling good enough. So ultimately, I equated that when I was approved of by others, whether it be how I looked, how I acted, my achievements or my successes, I would receive love in the form of a variety of expressions and ways. But when I wasn't doing that, I wasn't feeling lovable. And I ultimately didn't feel that I was loved. So that's really what it comes down to. And it's the hardest because mom and dad are those first, or mom or dad for, children or people who've been in single parent homes. You look up to them. They're your mentors and your role models. They're your first, relationships that you formulate aside from maybe siblings. I'm an only child, so I didn't have that. But mom and dad are like the people in your life where you really look up to them, and they're your whole world of what love means and looks like. And
understanding too. I mean, they push you into school. I use the word push, but they put you into school at a really young age, and you're taught that if you do good in school, it's good, and you get rewarded, just like you said. And if you don't, it's bad. So, you're just trying to make them happy because you're just following what they think's right, and you don't really know any better at that age either. So it kind of starts that vicious cycle of approval and self-worth. And
absolutely. One thing that I noticed over the years was it became a lot harder for me to get approval from my parents when I started to really stray away from what they thought my life was going to look like. What they believed life should be like for me. And when I started to get more into this type of work, we had kind of gone from one extreme to the other now. And they have no idea. My parents, God bless them, I love them. They are my best friends. I really do care and appreciate them, and I'm so grateful for them. But they have never followed a lot of this, right? The consciousness, they don't really even know what that means. And it's not because they're not intelligent people. It's just that's something that has not been pushed into their reality, or they have not read or been knowledgeable or even curious about until I've talked to them about it. And I noticed that when I started to get into this work, especially even before I opened this business 5 years ago, when I was talking about natural therapies and fitness and health and eating differently and all of it, there was a lot of resistance on their end. And when I told them about the industry that I was going into, because they didn't relate to it, they thought I had gone mad. Why are you going into an industry and starting a business that nobody really knows very much about? People are going to think you're weird, and people are going to think that you're strange, and how are you going to make a living out of that? And, how are you going to get on your own 2 feet and why don't you do what all of your friends are doing and go to work in a corporation? My father worked for a utilities company for a long, long time, and every summer growing up as a teenager and as a university student, I had the opportunity to go and work in the office full time. And eventually what often would happen with those individuals is they would get offered a job full time permanently after they had finished their post-secondary education or degree. And I refused all the time. So there was always conflict at home. But what I noticed, and there's a shift, and this is something that I'm taking this a little step further for everyone, that although I was certain about where I wanted to go in many ways, I was very passionate about this work and opening this business and, more of the new age spirituality, self-help, personal development arenas, I was still not approving of that within myself. I still hadn't fully bought into it and trusted that I was still looking at mom and dad and the people around me to say, wow, that's amazing that you're doing that. And we give you the high five, go for it. That sounds amazing. That's going to do so well. Because I still had internal belief systems that were saying, maybe I shouldn't be doing this because people aren't approving of it. or maybe I'm not getting that positive reinforcement that I'm really craving. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm going to really struggle with this, and maybe nobody's going to want to listen to what I have to say or get my help or have me assist them on their journey. So it wasn't until I actually fully approved myself of what I was doing, and I stood powerfully in that now I don't seek any approval. Now I have my family who once kind of, rolled their eyes or didn't get what I was doing, come to me and say, wow, after the first interview, I was sharing with the guys earlier that my parents listened to the radio interview, the first one we did 3 weeks ago. And when I asked them what they thought about it, they were really shell-shocked at, the type of work that I do and how passionate I am about it and, where I'm coming from and why I chose to do that. They were, I have to be honest, they were floored at the path that I've taken in a really exciting and supportive and loving way. Even though they've always, more or less been supportive and loving around it, they finally got it. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't because I was seeking their approval anymore. I owned it.
You're projecting acceptance is what you were doing.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So, the people around us are mirrors. So if you are looking for approval from your family, it's probably because you're looking to find approval within yourself and approve of yourself and who you are and the decisions you need to make. Because the world around you is going to constantly mirror what's going on within you.
Mm-hmm. Very
so
true.
It's about ownership, really. At the end of the day, it's owning who you are and not needing that approval. Like when you really feel like, what I'm doing feels right. Who I am feels right. Whether it's your family or not, you're going to stand powerfully in that. And oftentimes when you do, your relationships shift. Yep. And it's effortless and easeful, and you don't really have to stress about it.
Yeah, I like that. It's like not leaving room. It's like filling yourself with approval, so therefore there's no need to get it from anyone else.
Yeah. And then you'll just naturally kind of get it. That's the cool thing about that. All of a sudden now you're getting that acknowledgement and that what we would call approval or appreciation or praise or love, but it's not even that you're expecting it or you really even need it. It's lovely to have, but it's not something you're attaching yourself to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we can all say, just in case there's anybody out there, whether listening to this live or in the archives, that's let's say ingrained in this type of situation right now where, they feel something they want to make a change about or something they want to step out of, but it comes with some level of seeming disapproval or it's not as easy as something else, that we can all say from our own personal experiences, and that's many of them throughout the duration of our lives thus far, it's always been for the better in the end. I don't think any of us can ever say that making that thing, even though it came with some challenges, it came with some hardship, it may come with some experiences of people saying things or making us real, in the end, we're all better people as a result of it. We've all come to better understand ourselves. And as Vanessa just finished saying, we also eventually gave those people that played that button-pushing role the freedom to change down the road when we didn't need them to play that role anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're just playing that role to help create this experience because we're all in this together. And I think that's the really cool thing. I mean, you can look at that and it seems like some people say, like, oh, that makes it sound like everyone's just our pawns, and this experience is so selfish. But really, when you look at it, I think that's kind of cool that we're also interconnected, that we're going to walk around with one another. And if our souls see that, hey, I can push that button for Vanessa, I'm going to be, if I'm the one who can actually do that, why not create the dynamic where I'm going to do that? Mm-hmm. I think that's something to embrace and love the fact that we can actually do that for one another.
Totally.
Yeah.
Your souls are like shaking hands above you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When in reality, you're just like, listen.
I know, there's a punch coming your way.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But that, of course, takes the ability to look at the human experience from a very different perspective, one that we have not been, taught to believe it is, right? Because when we stay in that other, when we play out the experience how we've been taught or how it's been told to us, where we are separate from one another, where relationships are built off of attachment and expectation, then you are not able to see the power and the magnitude of what relationships are really meant to do for us on all levels. We're only seeing it from a mental level. What's in this for me? Yeah. And not from the level of the soul of what's in this for me. It's, what's in this for me, like in terms of the ego. Mm-hmm. What am I going to get from this experience? Well, if I'm not going to get something that I feel is useful or going to engage my egoic beliefs and fears and all of that, then forget this. I don't want it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's what I think that's why it's really hard for people to wrap their head around. Sometimes the soul's experience is so different, that we're all here to serve and push each other's buttons in a loving way, or that what we would define as that loving or more gentle way, and sometimes that more intense way, as a means to evolve. But I think if we start to look at it that way, yeah, you're going to be getting rid of these programs around comparison and approval so that you can be you.
Yep.
That's the best gift you can give the world.
I like to think that most of the times that we feel like this existence is so challenging, we're caught up in something so deep. I think at the same time our soul's probably pretty freaking excited at that moment. It's like, oh yeah, hey, look at this. We're looking at this finally. We're going through that.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you look at it that way, it makes things a little bit more lighthearted.
Yes.
There's something always having fun. There's always a purpose to everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's only as serious as you make it. You know?
It's true, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree with that.
The more wrapped up you are in the stories you have around your experiences, I find the more difficult and challenging your experiences become.
Yep.
It's just perception.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Now I want to talk about a biggie. I'm going to leave us a good chunk of time here, because you never know where it can go. I mean, we could be done with it in 2 minutes, but I have a feeling it's going to delve quite a bit here.
Yay.
We live in a world that's dominated by social media, without a doubt. There's far more communication existing on social media than there is in physical interaction, that's for sure. And even, I'll say, mobile interaction. I think people are talking way more through social media rather than even on the phone with one another. It's almost become foreign to have somebody actually call you and to, experience this live communication with another person. So with that being the case, and social media being the beast that it is, the powerful tool, the beautiful thing that it is, the big reason why we're able to even to do this right now, but being the beast that it is at the same time, let's talk about the need for approval on things like social media. And the fact that we have this ability on the Facebook, on the Twitter. I sound like an old person when I'm saying on the Facebook.
On the Twitter.
Yeah, I really aged myself there. But,
You're an old soul, Mark.
Yeah, but, when we're on these things, we have the ability to edit what we say, to double check it, to crop it, to Photoshop it, to only put up what we feel good about, what we want to promote and what we don't want to promote, we really have the opportunity to create this ulterior version of ourselves that's a lot less raw than the one when people actually meet us in person. So that being the case, let's talk about that right there. In your guys' views, both being heavily ingrained in social media yourselves, I am as well, do you feel that right now we as a collective are basically disconnecting from who we truly are and are inclined to create these false versions of ourselves on these social media outlets?
I love that. It's like an oxymoron.
Jeff is like nodding his head here. I love it. Yeah. We do
social media. So true. Yeah, we create these profiles and we pick the best pictures and we put up only the good pictures of us having fun and when we're hanging out with our friends, and it's like that's like 5% of your life. Not even sometimes,
100%.
It's like a false reality that we create, and then that's where the whole comparison comes in too. Like you're clicking through people's profiles and you're looking at how much fun they're having. It's a bad cycle. It can be.
It absolutely can be a very unhealthy cycle that we put ourselves in. I mean, I feel that people on social media often project a heightened version of themselves and are not fully being authentic and sharing their vulnerabilities and sharing their stories because they want to express or show a version of themselves that is what they think is the highest possible version of themselves. People are only willing to share what they want to share. And that's what inspired me to write that article. I think it was about a month or so ago. And it was from my clicking through the social media and reading people's posts. I mean, if I have to read sometimes one more person saying, yes, I've had the best day of my life, and I think it's amazing that we celebrate each other's successes, and I'm one to say that too. I will post those things. But what I'm noticing a little bit, I don't know if you guys can agree with me on that, I'm starting to notice in my network, on my news feed, I'm actually more interested in reading about or listening to people's vulnerability. Their stories of when they're not going through such a great place with their life, when they're, talking to people about feeling off or going through a depression, or, they're experiencing anxiety, or that they need help with something. I think there is a shift that is happening where we're becoming more inclined to connect and reach out to each other on social media when people are more expressive about what they're sharing, or their shame, or whatever it is that they're going through. I think it's kind of becoming a little passé now to consistently be posting all of these amazing, fabulous events and festivities that you're going to, rather than actually being real, because you portray this perfect life. And if that's all you're portraying, chances are that's probably not what's actually happening in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I think that there is a means we need to filter sometimes. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I don't need to share every moment of my day or every cry that I have.
You need our privacy, absolutely.
You need your privacy, but I find as a coach and as a healer and doing this work that I love to share my personal stories, which is why I'm on the air with you. And even in my sessions and with students, I love to share my personal stories of my challenges, my difficulties, my triumphs, my successes and my failures, if you will, because it keeps people real.
Mm-hmm.
Authentic. We're more inclined to want to reach out and connect to somebody who's being real rather than somebody who's trying to show us a heightened version of themselves that's probably not really realistic. Now, there could be periods of time where people are going through really awesome phases of their life, and they're sharing that, and that's amazing. I think we need to support one another that way. But I think we're also going to start to see, and this is just a trend that I'm picking up on, more and more people are going to be less afraid to be real, because that's how we're going to connect. Brene Brown has swept, Dr. Brene Brown, who I'm a huge fan of her work, has swept the world by storm with, her work with Oprah. And she talks a lot about being seen and about vulnerability and stepping into our shame. And when we actually have an outlet for shame, when we actually are vulnerable with other people, we connect more deeply. And at the end of the day, what is social media all about? Really, what was the grand purpose of it? To connect. So if we're only showing this version of ourselves that we want the world to see, we're ultimately still diffusing connection away from us. We're pushing it away. We are just trying to show the world who we think we need to be or who they think that we should be, rather than saying, this is who I am, and I'm going to be accepted for that, and I'm going to connect to people who are willing and wanting to connect with me for who I am, not this heightened version of myself.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, the trend, I really believe, as we go through this big shift on this planet and through humanity, is that social media is going to be this amazing tool for us to become more vulnerable, become more open and expressive about our pain, about our suffering, about the challenges and the triumphs, and it'll give us the ability to connect more deeply with one another.
It's a very interesting take, and I kind of agree with you. And I think that part of the challenge with that, too, is recognizing that when somebody does, post about their vulnerabilities, it's them asking for help. It's they're putting their hands up, being like, I want to talk to someone. They might not have somebody in their life. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people, their ego tends to judge that right away and saying, oh, they're playing a victim, they stop complaining on Facebook. But you can change your perspective on that and be like, listen, this person's being vulnerable. They're putting themselves out there. They want to talk to somebody. So why don't you just be that person to give them some advice, or like, hey, what's going on with your day? Rather than judging them and calling them a victim, or, taking that approach.
Which is that judgmental, ego-based approach most of the time when we cast judgment upon something we've read. If we don't know that person, ultimately we don't know where they're coming from, that's judging the experience they're having versus, get the full story. Mm-hmm. If that person, you see that person acting that way, whether it's coming from victim or not, that is a cry for help. Mm-hmm. It's choosing love now, and seeing, and asking yourself, where can I choose love when I want to reach out to people on social media versus fear? Because you can see that cyberbullying has taken over. And that's very, very fear-based, low consciousness, egoic behavior. I mean, people are vicious behind their screens.
Yeah. I mean, I just wrote an article about that, actually. Why are people so mean? Has the internet killed empathy and compassion? And we see a lot of dense stuff on the back end of CE with the comments that we get in articles, because we write about topics that challenge a lot of people's belief systems, and they're very hot topics, and people get this disconnection from their words when they're behind a screen, and they say some really mean things to each other. And my confusion comes in because you don't see that in public. You don't see that at coffee shops. You don't see that when you're having a random conversation with a stranger. You're not attacking them for their belief systems. You're having a respectful conversation where there's mutual reciprocation for what each other is saying. Mm-hmm. But you don't see that online. It's like the people are just defense mode and attacking.
It's so easy to hide behind the screen. And I remember that was one of the main reasons I had shared in one of my articles. I think it was in January when I came back to write online. I was writing for CE for the magazine from January of 2013 to December of 2013. And I was invited to also post articles online. And I had posted, I think, about 5 or 6 articles up until like May or June of last year, maybe even April. And I remember some of the articles that I had written, and I got a lot of backlash for a couple of them, like some really awful comments. And I also remember on Facebook I was bullied one time before, too, for the work I had chosen for doing this work. And I remember, and I knew it was you guys, it was with CE, I had posted a little blurb around the pharmaceutical industry versus natural therapies, and I had positioned it in such a way that I was actually giving credit to both industries, but the backlash I received, because it went viral and went everywhere. I had a lot of people supporting me on it and saying, wow, this is great. And then I had a bunch of people calling me all kinds of derogatory and offensive names, making it personal. And clearly they hadn't read what it was that I had posted. They just took maybe one sentence that they had read and amplified it and made it so personal and found a way to slur some sort of rude comment my way. And, that was enough when I had gone through this experience, because I am quite sensitive, for me to step back and say, oh my God, like I need to shrink. Maybe I shouldn't be sharing, my thoughts and my views, and I shouldn't really be sharing my voice in this manner, because look at the backlash I'm getting. I'm not getting as much appreciation here as I'm getting, offensive, rude comments. What's the point in me putting myself through this experience? And then, January rolled around, and I had a lot of time to think about it, and I was vulnerable about it. In my post, I said, the reason why I haven't written is not because I've been busy. That's the excuse I gave everyone. It's because I was afraid to be vulnerable, and I was afraid to express myself because of the hurtful comments I was getting. And I'm not going to play small anymore. There's going to be a lot of people who are not going to agree with the things that I say. Perfect. That's great. So there's going to be a lot of people who will. Perfect. That's great. But I'm not going to stop being me because some of the population doesn't like it or agree with it.
Right.
Sorry. Not going to apologize for being myself, because I'm quite proud of the person I've become and the woman I'm evolving into. Mm-hmm. And I'm here to assist. That's why I'm here to serve the planet. And if I'm shrinking, if I'm holding myself back, what good is that? How am I being of best service in that state?
Absolutely. I think I think all of us on the CE team can attest to experiencing that same thing, where you put yourself out there and these are your words. It couldn't get any more personal. Mm-hmm. And you have people attacking you and all of a sudden talking about you like they know you personally. And, I brought up this example in the article, and we have a writer on the team who wrote about the dangers around non-organic tea and, the concentrations of certain elements which you should watch out for. And somebody basically wrote a blurb attacking her picture and saying things about her personal life like they knew her out of nowhere, and it had no context to the article around tea, and basically hurt her feelings, and it was just really brutal for me. And the internet can be a really cruel world.
And it's also serving us in a way to say, you know what, people can have their opinions, but I'm not going to stop doing what I'm here to do.
Exactly.
And collective evolution, we're here for the people to, expand people's consciousness and self-awareness and spirituality and, share information that is not always available to the masses. And we're, of course, going to get people who are not going to agree with that, and that's okay. You got to continue to shine anyways.
Exactly.
The greatest leaders and people, change makers on the earth, from, thousands and thousands of years, we can think about many of them, weren't always very popular or weren't always very supported. In fact, most of their ideas were laughed at and
persecuted.
Yeah. And, it's only through history that people were able to really understand what their purpose was and who they really were. And a lot of them didn't stop, their campaigns or their missions because people didn't agree with it. They kept moving toward that vision, moving into a higher level of service.
Right.
So it's about using those, nasty comments or rude remarks or whatever it is to actually better yourself and to stand even more of your power and strength, because God bless those people, truly bless those people who are acting that way. Because imagine if they're saying those things to you behind a screen when they don't know you, just imagine how they think and how they feel about themselves.
Very true. A lot of it's just fear-based.
Yeah.
It's like they're so attached to their belief systems that if they don't have that, they don't know who they are, and it's a huge fear. And belief systems can be really huge.
100%.
They can cause a lot of problems. They've caused wars.
Yeah.
Killed millions of people for certain belief systems.
That was big.
We're all kind of just sitting here like, oh, yeah.
What I also find interesting, because I went through a very similar thing also regarding collective evolution. When I first started back in 2010, there was about a year and a couple month period where I completely just shut up. And everything I did behind the scenes, because just prior to that I received some backlash from people that I really cared about and valued the opinion of, and people that I was used to receiving approval from, and people that I loved and were very close to me. And that just made me be like, okay, I'd rather just closet myself than make myself vulnerable again to receiving that, whether it be from them or anybody else. And now, being so many years ago now, we're already in 2014, it's funny because since that point, not only have I'm still a work in progress, but not only have I re-grasped ownership of what I'm doing, I'm proud of it, I'm ready to share it, I'm actively a part of things, I'm out there, I'm not hiding anything like I may have for that year and a bit, but it's been slowly, one at a time, from this core group of people, that you'll just have one of them randomly message you completely on their own and be like, hey, you know what? Good on you to keep doing what you're doing. It's like what you just said the other day made a lot of sense. They won't do it in a public message. They won't, because that still takes something else. But you get the little private message, or you'll see them in person, and they actually do have a lot more respect, and their role dictated them to have at that point, or their emotion may have triggered them to say at that point. So I think that, if you really stay grounded in what you know, what you want to share in each moment, you might even be pleasantly surprised down the road that some of these people that may have played a role in the past to make you feel like you should be closeting yourself are actually going to find their own truth and find their own way of whether or not they fully agree with you, but they're just going to have a level of respect. Because we all mature, we all go through things, and I think that's when social media really becomes cool, when we all kind of embrace the differences that we do have, and rather than challenge them or let our egos flare up in response to them, instead we just say, hey, that's what that person is. If I slightly disagree, that's okay. I don't need to make a big spectacle of slightly disagreeing, or get something that I live for the like of the funny moment. It's become cool to be the one who points out a mistake in something, or it becomes cool to become someone who points out something, like Jeff said, in someone's picture, or something about their little mini blurb and stuff like that. I can guarantee that whoever that was and whoever said any comment, if they had the opportunity to see that writer in person and have her share that exact same information with them, they wouldn't say any of that.
Yeah.
They wouldn't even think that. She's adorable. She's lovely. It's a great message that she shares. You're not going to think that. It's just it doesn't come about. It's because it's become cool to kind of get that, and maybe get a couple of people like, hoorah, oh yeah, look at you, you're a tough guy behind the screen. It's like we're all bullies as a byproduct of being bullied mostly by ourselves.
Yeah.
We bully ourselves.
Absolutely.
That's true.
I agree with that. And it just comes down to when you invest and you have a vested interest in knowing who you are, you're not going to feel the need to compare a need or seek approval from others.
Or find that self-worth in other people's opinion, right?
You're going to go within your own being and get to know who you really are and know that that is enough.
It almost inspires me to do this project on Facebook. It's take a normal profile picture of mine, and then just do what I look like most of the time, and then just sitting eating food like a grump, like a dirty person, and just like show my real self and like have this project. It could go viral. Who knows?
Jeff is beautiful in person. I don't know if that's possible, Jeff.
You guys.
Jeff may not think so at times, but only Jeff thinks so at times.
But that is a good idea.
I'm a hot tomato over here right now. I'm so red as my shirt.
You are.
Well, we've got a couple minutes left. I mean, we touched upon everything I really want to touch upon. I'm glad we got to take that time to talk a little bit about social media. I mean, is there anything else in regards to stuff that you guys want to bring up, or anything just before I kind of close things out, or do you want to?
I really feel like when we are needing to compare ourselves to others, or when we're, seeking approval, it's, we're playing small. At the end of the day, I think you just need to remind yourself that I am one of 7 billion people on this planet. One of 7 billion. That's a lot of people. So your only job is to shine brightly. Your only job is to know who you are and just step in and stand in your magnificence.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever that may be. If there's only one of you out of 7 billion people, you are as unique can get. So own that. Take responsibility for that. Shine. Stop hiding. Stop trying to fit into that template. And create your own version of what life will feel good at, or what you feel like life will look like for you, instead of making it about what other people think it should be like.
Mm-hmm.
This is your life to live. Nobody else's. So don't be afraid to go full out in that and play big.
Mm-hmm. I like the idea of taking action. Now that we've talked about this, what are we all going to do in our personal lives? Something that's going to go against the convention of seeking approval or, creating these false profiles. Like, what are you going to do after this conversation to make the change happen? Because we need more action, and we need more action and less talking. So I'm excited. I'm going to do something little that's going to spark some cool conversation, hopefully.
Jeff's not going to sleep tonight. He's just going to be all excited laying in his bed, looking at the ceiling.
Like a mad scientist.
The creativity is
going to save the world.
I love it. So, just to close off, thank you everybody for listening to CU Radio tonight. We were happy to be back on the air tonight. This was another great discussion. I think we've got great chemistry between the three of us. Whoever else we're ever going to have coming in, it's going to be the same thing. It feels really good to be going again. Whether you're listening to this live or whether you're listening to it on the archive, we thank you for being a part of this. We invite you to share this with anybody else who you think this might, impact. I think, like we said off the top, comparison and need for approval are things that we're all going through. So I'm sure there's something that everybody can take from this conversation. And if this conversation even sparks more interest, there's tons of tools on Collective Evolution itself. All you have to do is go on the search bar on the home page and you type in the word comparison, you type in the word approval. You're going to have Vanessa's articles coming up, you're going to have some of Jeff's articles coming up, you're going to have some of my articles coming up, as well as tons of other people's, because these are regularly talked about topics, and these are great resources to look at and to make a part of your life and to also share with others and maybe even inspire you to make your own resources. So thank you for being a part of this tonight. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks Vanessa for stopping by.
Of course. Thank you guys. Always a pleasure and an honor to be here with you. I love our chat.
Yeah, we look forward to having you again in the future. And
Thank you.
Stay tuned. We hope to have some pretty big guests coming up in the near future. So stay tuned for that announcement.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.